For hundreds of thousands of years, half of humanity has lived with menstruation. Every month, across every continent, in every civilization. And yet history books will happily spend 40 pages explaining Roman roads, but almost nothing on how ancient women actually managed their periods. Which is strange, because menstruation was never just a biological event. To many ancient societies, it was mysterious, powerful, dangerous, sacred, sometimes all at once. And the way a culture understood menstruation could shape the entire life of a woman. Could she enter a temple? Could she touch food? Could she sleep in her own home? Was she considered polluted or spiritually powerful? The answer changed depending on where she was born. And some of those answers were surprisingly practical. Others were completely ridiculous. In ancient Egypt, menstruation was not treated as something shameful. Egyptian civilization left behind some of the earliest medical texts in history, including the Ebers Papyrus from around 1550 BCE, which recorded gynecological conditions and women's health concerns. Egyptian women likely used softened papyrus or reusable linen as early menstrual pads. Simple, practical, effective. But culturally, menstruation also had a deeper meaning. It was connected to fertility, the goddess Isis, and the life-giving cycles of the Nile. The Egyptians did not generally treat menstruating women as dangerous beings who needed to disappear from society. Women continued their daily lives with far less stigma than in many later civilizations. Then came ancient Greece, brilliant in philosophy, strange in biology. Aristotle, one of the most famous thinkers in Western history, believed menstrual blood was basically failed semen. To him, the male body was the ideal form, and the female body was colder, weaker, and incomplete. So menstruation became, in his eyes, proof that women were biologically inferior. But Greek medicine was not always so absurd. Hippocratic medical texts often treated menstruation as a normal bodily function connected to overall health. So Greece had a strange contradiction. Greek doctors could understand periods as part of health, but Greek philosophers still used them as an excuse to call women inferior. Meanwhile, Greek women simply got on with life. They used soft wool as pads or primitive tampons. Because while men were debating what menstruation meant, women were solving the practical problem. Ancient Rome took this confusion to another level. Pliny the Elder wrote with total confidence that a menstruating woman could destroy crops, blunt weapons, turn wine sour, kill bees, and even stop storms. It sounds like mythology, but he presented it as fact. According to him, menstrual blood was not just blood, it was almost a supernatural force of destruction. Fortunately, ordinary Roman women did not organize their lives around every strange thing elite men wrote down. They used cloth, wool, and natural sea sponges. Sea sponges were soft, absorbent, washable, and reusable. For wealthy Roman women, fine linen and household servants made menstrual care easier. For poor women, it was rough cloth, rags, and whatever was available. So even in Rome, menstruation revealed class. The body was the same, but comfort was not. Across many cultures, menstruation became surrounded by ritual restrictions. In ancient Jewish law, menstruating women were considered ritually impure under the rules of Niddah and later purified through immersion in a mikveh bath. In some ancient Hindu texts, men were warned that contact with a menstruating woman could weaken their wisdom or strength. In Zoroastrian traditions, menstruating women could be isolated and kept away from sacred elements like fire and earth. But not every restriction meant the same thing. In many indigenous cultures, women spent their periods in what are often called moon lodges. To outsiders, this can sound like exile, but in some traditions, it was not about shame, it was about power. Menstruating women were believed to be spiritually heightened, closer to the moon, closer to creation. The moon lodge could be a place of rest, ritual, food, herbs, and female knowledge. So the same act of separation could mean two completely different things. In one culture, fear. In another, reverence. Medieval Europe was much less glamorous. For peasant women, life did not pause because of menstruation. There was farming, cooking, cleaning, childcare, labor, and no modern products. For many poor women, the most likely reality was simply bleeding into thick, dark wool clothing while continuing to work. This is often called free bleeding, not as a lifestyle choice, but because there was no other realistic option. Wealthier women had more choices. They could use folded linen or rags held in place by belts. But again, class decided comfort. Interestingly, medieval medicine also saw menstruation as medically important. Following Galenic ideas, many doctors believed periods helped the body release excess blood and maintain balance. If menstruation was delayed, healers prescribed herbs known as emmenagogues. Plants such as parsley or tansy were used to stimulate menstrual flow. Some of these herbs really did contain compounds that could affect the uterus. So beneath the strange medical theories, there was also real practical knowledge. Knowledge often built by women, shared by women, and rarely credited to women. Traditional Chinese medicine treated menstruation very differently from Greek philosophy. Instead of seeing the female body as a defective version of the male body, Chinese medical systems viewed it as its own complete system. Menstrual blood was not meaningless. Its timing, color, texture, and flow were signs of overall health. A cycle could reveal imbalance, weakness, heat, cold, stagnation, deficiency. Women used silk or cotton pads held by woven belts. By the Tang dynasty from around 600 to 900 CE, some women had sophisticated undergarments with fabric pouches that worked surprisingly like reusable menstrual pads. Chinese medicine also developed herbal formulas to regulate cycles and reduce cramping. It was not perfect, but it treated menstruation as something worth studying seriously. Across the Americas, the story is harder to recover. Colonization destroyed many indigenous records, traditions, and oral histories. But surviving evidence suggests that Aztec women used maguey fibers from the agave plant as absorbent material. Maguey was incredibly useful. It could be used for rope, cloth, food, drink, and likely menstrual care. In many North American indigenous traditions, menstruation was connected to the moon, spiritual strength, and cycles of renewal. Women in moon lodges followed specific customs. They ate certain foods, used certain herbs, rested from normal duties. And in some communities, their menstrual time was seen as a period of increased spiritual power. Again, not every ancient woman experienced menstruation as shame. Sometimes it was understood as a form of strength. Then, very recently in human history, the modern disposable pad appeared. Not thousands of years ago, not even hundreds. In 1888, the first commercial disposable pads called Lister's towels were introduced. But they failed. Not because they were useless, because Victorian women were too embarrassed to buy them openly from male pharmacists. The product was ahead of the market, but society was not ready to speak honestly about periods. Mass adoption came later in 1921, when Kotex successfully marketed disposable pads as a hygiene necessity. That means for almost all of human history, women managed menstruation without modern products, with cloth, wool, linen, sponges, papyrus, cotton, silk, plant fibers, belts, undergarments, and shared knowledge. Pain was part of the story too. Menstrual cramps or dysmenorrhea are not modern. Ancient women felt them. Medieval women felt them. Egyptian, Roman, Chinese, Aztec, and indigenous women felt them. Different cultures used warmth, rest, movement, compresses, massage, and herbs such as chamomile, ginger, and fennel. Some remedies were symbolic, some were ineffective, but many came from generations of observation. Women knew what helped because women had always been helping each other, and that may be the most important part of this hidden history. Women were never passive victims of their biology. They adapted, they experimented, they invented, they taught each other. The real problem was not that ancient women lacked intelligence or materials. The problem was that men wrote most of the official histories. And the practical knowledge of menstruation lived mostly in kitchens, homes, bathhouses, fields, temples, and women's communities. It was used every month, but rarely recorded. Cleopatra dealt with it. Medieval peasants dealt with it. Greek wives dealt with it. Roman servants dealt with it. Chinese noblewomen dealt with it. Aztec priestesses dealt with it. Half of humanity dealt with it. Every generation, every empire, every century. And yet history treated it like an embarrassing footnote. But menstruation is not a side topic. It is one of the most universal human experiences in history. It shaped medicine, religion, gender roles, daily labor, taboos, rituals, technology, and the private lives of billions of women who came before us. So maybe the real mystery is not how ancient women managed their periods. They clearly did. The real mystery is why history tried so hard not to talk about it.